My name is Samantha Green. I'm 31 years old, and for over 8 years, I had poured my life into this company. I knew every cubicle, every workflow, every client's pet peeve. I was proud of my role as director of operations, proud of the small victories and the big ones. I had even stayed late countless nights, often skipping dinners, putting in hours no one saw, all because I genuinely believed in the work and in the people around me. But that morning, walking into the office with my usual optimism, something was off. There was a crispness in the air, a quiet tension I couldn't place. The receptionist gave me a polite, almost rehearsed smile. "Good morning, Samantha," she said, but her eyes were different. Avoidant. Guarded. I frowned and walked toward my office. When I opened the door, I froze. My chair was empty, my personal items, pictures of my family, awards from client recognition programs, even the little succulent I'd nurtured for years, were gone. In their place, a simple typed note. Effective immediately, you are no longer in this position. HR will contact you regarding next steps. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hand shook, and I gripped the desk for support. I had always known corporate politics could be ruthless, but I had never imagined someone would just erase me like this. No warning, no discussion, nothing. Just replaced. And then I looked up. Sitting behind my old desk, with that same smug, calculated smile, was Alex Parker. Alex. The friend I had once helped when he was living on the streets after being evicted from his apartment. The guy I had brought home, fed, let shower, let money to when he had nothing. The one person I thought would never betray me. Alex. My voice cracked. I wanted to yell, to scream, to throw something, but my body felt paralyzed. What are you doing here?" He looked at me with an unsettling calm, the kind of calm that masks a knife hidden behind a smile. "Good morning, Samantha. I guess this is awkward." I could barely breathe. The room felt smaller, air thicker. My brain kept cycling through memories, the nights I had stayed up, worrying if he had eaten, the hours I spent helping him draft resumes, the countless texts where I had reassured him, told him he would make it. And now, in this same office, in the company we had both built our careers around, he was the one sitting in the seat I had earned, worked for, bled for. "Alex, I don't understand," I whispered, clutching the edge of the desk. We trusted each other. I helped you." He tilted his head slightly, the light catching the corner of his sharp jawline. "And I appreciated it truly. But times change, Samantha. People change. And sometimes you have to make hard decisions." I wanted to shake him, scream, maybe even laugh at the absurdity of it all. How did someone I had lifted up now push me down? I sank into the chair that used to be mine, my hands trembling, and tried to think clearly. HR would call, of course. They would talk about restructuring, about strategic alignment, about new visions for the company. All corporate euphemisms that didn't begin to cover the betrayal I felt. The office around me seemed to shift. Colleagues I had known for years avoided eye contact. Some whispered in corners. Others pretended I didn't exist. I realized, painfully, that the web of loyalty I had believed in was fragile, conditional. Alex had moved quickly, silently, and everyone else had followed or stayed out of the way. I left my office for a walk, trying to gather myself. The early morning sun was bright, almost mocking in its cheerfulness. I passed the cafeteria where I had shared countless lunches with colleagues, now eerily quiet, the hum of daily operations replaced by a cold, anticipatory tension. I thought about all the years I had spent mentoring people, helping interns, covering shifts for teammates, and supporting upper management. Did it all mean nothing? My mind went back to Alex. I had fed him, trusted him, even confided in him when I struggled with my own personal problems. I remembered nights he had come to my apartment hungry, ashamed, and the way I had insisted he eat first, sleep second. And now, he sat in the chair that had been mine for years, the power I had worked for suddenly slipping through my fingers. I wanted answers. I wanted confrontation. But mostly, I wanted the betrayal to make sense. I had always believed in loyalty, in reciprocity, in the idea that if you helped someone, they wouldn't turn on you. But Alex had shown me that loyalty could be a one-way street. By mid-morning, HR did call. A polite woman named Karen explained the restructuring, the new leadership vision, and the transition period. She spoke slowly, as if explaining something to a child. Every word felt like salt in an open wound. I was told I could take a severance package, work in another department, or resign immediately. I felt the weight of the world crashing down, a mix of humiliation, disbelief, and anger coiling in my chest. I thought of all the plans I had, the projects I had championed, the late nights, the networking, the strategies that had been implemented under my watch.
Gone.
All of it, in the blink of an eye. That afternoon, I found myself back in the empty office that had been mine. I picked up the framed photo of me and my parents at a company gala, a small smile frozen in time. I held it close, feeling the sting of betrayal, but also a small ember of resolve flicker inside me. This was not the end of me. It could not be. I remembered something my mother once told me. You can't control what others do, but you can control how you rise after it. The thought was cold comfort, but it was a start. I spent the rest of the day walking through the office floor, quietly observing. Alex was busy, delegating, commanding attention. The same people who had once sought my guidance now followed him. Some of them gave me apologetic looks. Others ignored me completely. I realized that power in corporate life was fleeting and fragile, and the people who had once been friends could shift allegiance in a heartbeat. I went home that evening, feeling a mix of rage, sadness, and disbelief. My apartment felt like a refuge, yet even there, I couldn't escape the hum of betrayal buzzing in my mind. I remembered all the times I had gone out of my way for Alex, buying him lunch when he had no money, helping him secure his first office job, offering guidance when he floundered in his career. And now, in the ultimate twist of irony, he was the one sitting at the top, and I was left reeling, the helper discarded. That night, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every interaction I had with him, every moment of trust one had extended. I felt the sting of anger, the bitter taste of regret, not for helping, but for believing that helping guaranteed loyalty. I realized that sometimes, even your best efforts, even your kindness, could be weaponized against you. By the time I drifted to sleep, a thought had crystallized. I would not be defeated. Not by Alex. Not by betrayal. Not by the sudden, ruthless shifts of corporate life. Whatever happened next, I would stand on my own 2 feet. I would chart my own path, reclaim my voice, and find a way to rise, stronger than before. Because one thing was clear. Being replaced didn't erase the years I had built, the skills I had honed, or the integrity I carried. And though it hurt more than I could have imagined, it also ignited a fire I hadn't felt in years, a fire that would not be extinguished by the arrogance of a so-called friend. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache, my mind spinning with fragments of yesterday, Alex's smug smile, the cold indifference in the office, the whispered apologies that felt empty. I sat at my small kitchen table, mug of coffee in hand, staring out the window at the bustling street below. The world didn't stop because I had been blindsided, because I had been replaced without notice. People still rushed to work, honking cars, joggers running with earbuds, mail carriers delivering letters. Life moved on, indifferent to my personal crisis. I tried to shake off the bitterness, telling myself I needed clarity, not chaos. I had spent the night drafting what I considered my options, fighting back, staying silent, and finding a new job, or confronting Alex directly. Every scenario played out in my mind with its own consequences, each one igniting both fear and a strange, simmering determination. The first option, the most immediate and visceral, was confrontation. I couldn't help it. Part of me longed to march back into the office and demand answers, to stare into Alex's eyes and force him to see the betrayal, the audacity of it all. But I knew better. Experience had taught me that raw emotion rarely wins battles in corporate arenas. People like Alex thrived on chaos, feeding off others' vulnerability. If I confronted him impulsively, I would only hand him another opportunity to show dominance. I sipped my coffee, my green eyes tracing the faint pattern in the ceramic mug, thinking about how we had met. Years ago, Alex had been practically homeless, wandering from temporary jobs to odd gigs, struggling to make ends meet. I had found him one evening in the downtown park, shivering under a thin hoodie, holding nothing but a backpack that looked half the size of his body. I had walked him to my apartment, fed him warm soup, offered a shower, and encouraged him to take baby steps toward stability. Back then, I had believed in the purity of helping someone, in the unspoken contract of gratitude that comes from kindness. I had thought that feeding someone when they were hungry, supporting them when no one else would, created bonds that could withstand distance, ambition, and even power. Apparently, I had been naive. I glanced at my phone and saw a string of missed messages from coworkers. Some were simple check-ins, worried tones inquiring if I was okay. Others were cryptic, vague, the kind that made my stomach churn. A few messages from HR detailed severance procedures, signatures, forms, and legal jargon. Each ping was a reminder of the life I had built being methodically dismantled. I decided to take a walk, needing air to clear the fog in my mind. The crisp morning felt sharp against my skin, and the sunlight bouncing off office buildings gave the city a cold, indifferent gleam. People brushed past me without noticing, each absorbed in their own worlds, while I wrestled with mine. The thought of Alex walking the same streets, occupying my office, wielding the authority I had earned, made bile rise in my throat. But I also realized something crucial as I wandered. This wasn't just about him. It was about me, about how I would respond to betrayal, how I would reclaim my agency in a world that could be cruel and unpredictable. I had been trained to manage operations, handle crises, and anticipate risks. If I could apply those same skills to my personal life, to this crisis, perhaps I could turn the situation around. By mid-morning, I had formulated a plan. First, I needed information, detailed insights into the corporate decisions, board communications, and any internal documents that led to my replacement. Second, I needed allies, people who had worked with me, people who respected my work, who understood the value I had brought to the company. Third, I needed composure, a calm, strategic approach that would prevent Alex from seeing my anger, my pain, or my vulnerability. I returned home, settled at my desk, and began combing through emails and files I had saved over the years. It was like piecing together a puzzle, each document a small shard of proof of my contributions, my initiatives, my leadership. There were client contracts I had personally secured, internal memos highlighting cost-saving measures I had implemented, performance reports showing the departments I had successfully restructured. I felt a flicker of pride amid the pain. This was tangible evidence that my work had mattered, even if Alex wanted to erase it from history. As I worked, my mind drifted back to Alex again. I remembered the late-night talks, the shared laughter, the conversations about dreams and ambition. I had genuinely celebrated his small victories, helped him navigate his first major project, and even recommended him for positions when he was barely scraping by. And now he had turned the tables, seizing the ultimate power in the company I had nurtured. The betrayal cut deep, sharper than I could have anticipated. By the afternoon, I reached out to a few trusted colleagues. Carefully, discreetly, I asked for meetings under the guise of informal catch-ups, coffee, lunch, short walks. I wanted to gauge their awareness, their loyalty, and their willingness to support someone they knew to be competent, fair, and hardworking. Each conversation revealed something new. Some were shocked and sympathetic, others hesitant, fearful of political fallout, and a few quietly congratulated Alex for his big promotion. It stung, realizing that ambition sometimes overrides gratitude, that loyalty is often conditional. Late in the day, I sat alone in a quiet corner of a small cafe near my apartment, sipping a latte, sketching out potential paths forward. One part of me wanted revenge, to humiliate Alex publicly, to expose every detail of his opportunism. Another part wanted closure, peace, and a clean break, proving that my integrity and competence weren't tied to titles or offices. I didn't yet know which path I would take, but I felt the first surge of empowerment. I could choose. That evening, I drafted a carefully worded email to my closest mentor in the industry, someone who had watched me grow professionally and personally for over a decade. I didn't vent, didn't plead, didn't beg. I simply outlined the situation, the facts, and my desire for guidance on next steps. Sending that email felt like reclaiming a small portion of control, a way to anchor myself amid chaos. When I returned home, I found my apartment surprisingly quiet, almost eerily so. I sat on the couch, chestnut brown hair falling over my shoulders, blue blouse slightly wrinkled from the day, navy jeans comfortable yet professional enough to remind me of the person I had been in the office. I stared at the ceiling, reflecting on the irony. The person I had helped rise to prominence was now the one who had toppled me. Sleep came fitfully, filled with fragmented dreams of boardrooms, whispered conversations, and Alex's smug smile. I awoke the next morning with a sense of resolve. I wasn't going to let this define me. The betrayal was personal, yes, but it was also an opportunity, a chance to demonstrate resilience, to navigate the corporate battlefield with the same precision I had once applied to operations and strategy. By the time I arrived at my favorite neighborhood park, my son safely at school, I felt a subtle shift. My anger had cooled slightly, replaced by determination. I would need to be strategic, patient, and meticulous. I would gather allies, leverage my experience, and chart a path that allowed me to regain not only my professional standing but also my dignity. I realized something critical. This wasn't just about Alex, about the betrayal, or even about the office itself. This was about proving to myself that no matter the deception, no matter the loss, I could rise again, stronger, smarter, and more unyielding than before. And so, I began the first real steps of what would become a calculated journey, gathering evidence, rebuilding networks, and quietly assessing the true power dynamics within the company. I was no longer just reacting, I was planning. And for the first time in 2 days, I felt the stirrings of hope. The betrayal had hurt, but it had not broken me. The following week felt like living in a surreal fog. Walking past my former office, seeing Alex in the chair I had once called mine, felt like staring at a mirror where the reflection was someone else entirely, someone I had once trusted, nurtured, and believed in. I kept my interactions minimal, focused on gathering information quietly and observing the subtle ways the office culture was shifting under his command. I started with my personal network. Over the years, I had built relationships not just through competence, but through genuine care, mentorship, and collaboration. I reached out discreetly to colleagues who had worked with me on major projects, asking for informal chats. Some were nervous, fearful of repercussions. Others were cautiously supportive, offering insights about decisions I hadn't been privy to and the subtle power plays occurring behind the scenes. Each conversation reinforced my understanding. Alex hadn't merely stepped into my role. He had strategically maneuvered into a position of influence, and many had willingly followed his lead. One afternoon, I arranged to meet Lena, a senior analyst who had been with the company longer than either of us. We met in a small cafe, away from prying eyes. Lena looked around nervously before speaking, lowering her voice. "Samantha, I can't believe what he did. He came in like a whirlwind, and suddenly people were rearranging their loyalties. I'm scared too, but I can tell you, your contributions didn't go unnoticed. You've built something solid here." He's taking credit, but everyone remembers who built the foundation. Her words brought a measure of comfort, but also fueled my resolve. Alex had underestimated me, not just in my abilities, but in my resilience, my connections, and my capacity to strategize. I realized that my approach couldn't be emotional. It had to be meticulous. I needed to gather everything: emails, performance reports, project records, client correspondence, to document my achievements and to subtly expose where Alex had leveraged my work for his advantage. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by stacks of documents, my laptop open, fingers flying over the keyboard. I mapped timelines, cross-referenced achievements with internal memos, and began crafting a strategic narrative. The betrayal I felt was still raw, a tight knot in my chest, but it was transforming into a controlled focus, a drive to reclaim not only what had been taken but also the respect and authority I had earned. The following days were a delicate dance. I navigated office interactions with precision, greeting colleagues with polite smiles while internally assessing their loyalties. Alex seemed confident, almost untouchable, but I noticed small cracks, subtle disagreements among senior staff, whispered conversations ending abruptly when he approached, and moments where his facade of control faltered. These observations became part of my strategy. I wasn't going to rush. I would wait for the perfect opportunity, and when it came, I would act decisively. One evening, while reviewing client contracts, I came across an email thread that made my pulse quicken. It was correspondence where Alex had presented a proposal that was largely my work as if it were entirely his own. The realization stung. He had not only taken my position but had begun rewriting the narrative of my contributions, erasing my efforts from the company's collective memory. But the documents were still there, undisputed proof that I had built what he was now claiming. I began to compile these into a secure digital folder, labeling each with dates, context, and supporting evidence. It was painstaking work but necessary. I knew that if I were to challenge him, or even to reclaim my narrative, I needed more than emotion. I needed incontrovertible facts. My resentment fueled my diligence. Every misappropriated email, every stolen idea, became a thread I carefully documented, weaving a tapestry of accountability that even Alex could not ignore. Amid all this, I also had to manage my personal life, which was not immune to the stress. Friends noticed my exhaustion, my occasional irritability, the way I could become lost in thought for hours. I tried to explain vaguely that work politics were draining, but no one truly understood the depth of the betrayal. The same friend who had once celebrated Alex's recovery with me now watched with wary concern as I delved deeper into what felt like a silent war. One evening, I sat alone in my living room, chestnut hair pulled back into a loose bun, green eyes reflecting the soft glow of the floor lamp. I realized that betrayal was not just a corporate phenomenon, it was profoundly personal. Alex's actions had struck at the core of my trust, my belief in reciprocity, and my understanding of human loyalty. But I also understood that anger, while visceral and consuming, would not win this battle. Strategic clarity, patience, and careful planning would. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The building was quiet, most employees still trickling in. I walked past Alex's office, catching a glimpse of him reviewing reports, his expression confident, assured. But I noticed something subtle, a flicker of uncertainty as a senior board member entered and questioned some of the latest initiatives. It was a small crack, but cracks were openings. And I intended to find them all. I began to engage with clients independently, setting up calls, checking in on projects I had previously managed. The clients, many of whom trusted me implicitly, responded with enthusiasm, gratitude, and, in some cases, veiled concern about the sudden changes under Alex's leadership. Each conversation reinforced a truth I had always known. My reputation was built on integrity, skill, and relationships. That was a foundation Alex could not easily erase, no matter how confident he appeared. Late one afternoon, as I reviewed a particularly complex contract, I realized the enormity of what I had been given, a chance to reclaim not just my career, but also my dignity and authority. Alex had assumed that erasing my position would erase me entirely, but he had misjudged the network I had cultivated, the respect I had earned, and my ability to operate strategically under pressure. I also began to reflect on the personal lessons embedded in this experience. Trust, I realized, was not always reciprocated. Generosity could be exploited. And yet, abandoning those principles entirely would make me someone I did not want to be. I had a choice: to act rashly, to seek petty revenge, or to craft a path that combined both accountability and personal integrity. I chose the latter. By the end of the week, I had mapped a multi-step plan: discreetly document every instance of misappropriated work, quietly rebuild relationships with key stakeholders, and prepare for the moment when Alex would be confronted, not publicly or violently, but in a way that leveraged undeniable facts and demonstrated the depth of my contributions. I walked through the office that Friday evening, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and empowerment. The betrayal still burned, a cold, sharp ache, but beneath it, a steady flame of resolve. Alex had taken my chair, yes, but he had not taken my experience, my skill, or the respect I had earned from clients and colleagues alike. And those were weapons that no promotion could nullify. As I left the building, the setting sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. I breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the week lift slightly, replaced by a controlled, focused determination. The betrayal had been profound, the anger justifiable, but my path forward was clear. I would navigate this, piece by piece, quietly, strategically, until the balance was restored. And in that moment, I realized something essential. The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Alex may have assumed he had won, but I was preparing a comeback. Not for petty revenge, but to reclaim my rightful place, to assert the truth, and to demonstrate that betrayal, no matter how personal, could be met with intelligence, resilience, and unwavering determination. The following week, the office felt even more alien than before. The familiar hum of productivity was now punctuated by subtle whispers, hushed conversations, and the occasional awkward glance my way. Alex moved through the space with an air of self-assured authority, but beneath that polished exterior, I could detect small hesitations, moments where his confidence faltered when confronted with complex issues he hadn't fully mastered. I paid attention to these fissures. They were cracks in the armor that would become crucial in the days ahead. I spent mornings meticulously organizing my evidence. Emails, project reports, internal memos, client feedback forms, all of it became part of a carefully documented archive. Each piece told a story, a record of my years of dedication, leadership, and innovation. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I wasn't preparing for a dramatic confrontation yet. I was preparing for precision. I wanted undeniable proof, the kind that would speak louder than emotion or speculation. During this time, I also began reaching out to former colleagues and mentors discreetly. My network was stronger than I realized. People who had once admired my work offered words of encouragement, subtle guidance, and even strategic advice. One mentor, James, a retired executive I had worked with early in my career, told me in a hushed tone over coffee, "Samantha, you've built a foundation that Alex can't replicate. Don't let him rewrite history. Document everything, approach this strategically, and make sure the world sees the truth." His words struck me, not just as advice, but as validation. At the same time, I had to navigate office dynamics carefully. There were colleagues who had switched allegiance to Alex, motivated by ambition, fear, or the allure of appearing loyal to the new CEO. Others had stayed neutral, waiting to see how the situation would unfold. I learned to approach interactions with subtlety, planting seeds of awareness, without revealing the full extent of my plans. It was a delicate balance between observation and participation, like walking a tightrope over a floor of fragile trust and unspoken rivalries. One afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with Lena, the senior analyst who had become a quiet ally. We met in a small, unobtrusive conference room. Lena brought a folder of documents she had managed to access, highlighting discrepancies in project credit, instances of Alex presenting joint efforts as solely his own, and client communications that subtly indicated confusion over leadership transitions. I studied the materials, my pulse quickening. This was more than I had hoped for, a collection of tangible evidence to support the narrative I was building. "It's subtle," Lena whispered, glancing over her shoulder as if Alex might be lurking nearby. "But if presented carefully, this proves the contributions you made. People may have been fooled, but facts don't lie." Her words were both comforting and empowering. For the first time since being blindsided, I felt a flicker of control. I realized that the betrayal, while deeply personal, was not insurmountable. It was a challenge, yes, but also an opportunity to demonstrate strategic thinking, resilience, and professionalism under pressure. As the week progressed, I began to rebuild connections with key clients. I reached out with genuine concern, checking on ongoing projects, offering guidance, and subtly reinforcing my role in their success. The responses were overwhelmingly positive, emails filled with gratitude, appreciation for past work, and In some cases, subtle questions about the sudden changes in leadership. Each interaction reaffirmed a fundamental truth. Trust and respect, once earned, are not easily erased by a new title or a sudden power shift. Late one evening, I sat alone in my apartment, the glow of my laptop illuminating my face. Chestnut hair falling loosely over my shoulders, blue blouse slightly wrinkled from the day, navy jeans comfortable yet professional. I reviewed every document, every email, every conversation I had archived over the past week. The magnitude of the task ahead was clear. I wasn't just rebuilding my narrative. I was preparing for a calculated, precise reclamation of truth and authority. But there was also a personal dimension I could not ignore. The betrayal cut deep because it wasn't just professional, it was personal. Alex had been someone I had helped, nurtured, and believed in. The contrast between the friend I had known and the CEO sitting in my chair was stark, almost surreal. I replayed memories of late nights when I had lent him money, offered advice, and celebrated small victories. The weight of that trust, now violated, was almost unbearable. Yet, I realized that dwelling on anger alone would not serve me. Instead, I channeled that energy into meticulous planning. Every detail mattered: the timing of conversations, the evidence I would present, the allies I could rely upon, and the subtle ways to expose the truth without descending into personal vendetta. I had to be smarter, more patient, and disciplined. During this time, I also noticed small signs of tension within Alex's circle. Some employees whispered about inconsistencies in leadership decisions, while others seemed uncomfortable with his approach to client relations. These observations were small, almost imperceptible, but they were critical. They suggested that his authority, while outwardly solid, was not immune to disruption. One afternoon, I encountered Mark, a project manager who had often collaborated with me. He seemed hesitant at first, but eventually he confided, "Samantha, I don't know how you're handling this, but people are talking. Alex is different than we expected. He's aggressive, and not everyone agrees with his approach. You know the projects better than anyone. If you wanted to, you could show that." Mark's words were like a spark in dry tinder. I felt the first stirrings of a plan that could be executed not with overt confrontation, but with strategic leverage, evidence, allies, and timing. It was a calculated approach, one that would demonstrate the depth of my contributions and the disparity between perception and reality. That evening, I returned home, exhausted yet invigorated. I realized that my journey was no longer about recovering a position. It was about reclaiming agency, integrity, and respect. The betrayal had been a brutal lesson in human nature, corporate politics, and the fragility of trust. But it had also revealed an essential truth: resilience and intelligence could outlast impulsive power grabs and opportunistic ambition. I spent the night drafting emails, organizing documents, and outlining potential strategies. Every action was deliberate. I knew that when the moment came, it had to be precise, undeniable, and professional. The goal was not just to confront Alex, but to illuminate the truth, reclaim my narrative, and demonstrate that betrayal, no matter how personal, could be met with calculated, strategic empowerment. By the end of the week, I had mapped a clear path forward: document every misappropriated contribution, quietly rebuild relationships with key stakeholders, reinforce client trust, and prepare for a decisive, controlled exposure of the truth. It was a multi-step process, demanding patience, precision, and unwavering focus. Walking through the office that Friday evening, the sun casting long shadows across the floor, I felt a shift. The betrayal still burned, but beneath it was a steady flame of determination. Alex had taken my title, yes, but he had not taken my expertise, my relationships, or my integrity. And those were the tools I would wield, not impulsively, not angrily, but strategically, intelligently, and with quiet authority. As I left the building, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in weeks. The story wasn't over. The betrayal had hurt, yes, but it had also provided a lens through which I could see both the fragility of human ambition and the enduring strength of careful planning and strategic thinking. Alex may have assumed he had won, but I had begun a journey that would demonstrate resilience, intelligence, and the power of truth. And in that realization, I found a strange peace, a controlled, patient, yet unwavering determination to navigate the betrayal with precision and reclaim what I had earned, not through confrontation, but through undeniable evidence, relationships, and strategic foresight. The following week, I began implementing the first stage of my plan. I knew patience was key, but so was subtle action. I had spent days meticulously cataloging every email, memo, and project report that highlighted my contributions. Now it was time to start strategically positioning myself, reminding colleagues and clients of the work I had accomplished without appearing vindictive. I wanted my reputation to speak for itself. My mornings were spent quietly meeting with clients under the guise of casual check-ins, discussing ongoing projects, and offering insights that only someone with deep knowledge could provide. Each conversation reinforced their trust in me, subtly reminding them of my role in their success. I noticed the difference immediately. Clients who had once deferred entirely to Alex began seeking my input, valuing my expertise in ways that Alex, despite his new title, could not replicate. Back in the office, I observed Alex with a sharper eye than ever. His confidence remained outwardly unshaken, but cracks were appearing in his approach. He often dismissed my former initiatives, making decisions without consulting the teams that had once been under my guidance. Miscommunications cropped up, and his attempts to assert authority over areas he didn't fully understand created minor chaos, enough to validate my observations, but not so much that it drew immediate attention from upper management. I also deepened my connections with colleagues who had been hesitant to express loyalty. Over coffee or in whispered hallway conversations, I carefully reminded them of shared successes, subtly bringing to light the contributions I had made to projects that Alex was now taking credit for. Some were hesitant, fearful of repercussions. Others, however, were quietly eager to align with someone they knew had competence and credibility. Slowly, I began reconstructing a network of allies, a combination of gratitude, respect, and subtle influence. One afternoon, I had a discreet meeting with Mark, the project manager who had previously confided in me about Alex's aggressive approach. He handed me a folder with notes on project discrepancies, communications, and examples of decisions made without proper oversight. I studied the documents carefully, noting patterns, misattributed accomplishments, miscommunications deliberately left unresolved, and moments where Alex had attempted to rewrite the narrative of my work. "These aren't just mistakes," Mark whispered. "He's rewriting history." I nodded, realizing that while anger might tempt me to react impulsively, a measured approach was far more powerful. I began organizing all the evidence into a comprehensive portfolio, a clear, professional, and undeniable record of my contributions. Each entry was annotated with dates, context, and supporting communications. I wasn't just preparing to confront Alex. I was preparing to reclaim the truth in a way that couldn't be ignored. Evenings were spent in quiet reflection, going over my strategy, ensuring that every step was deliberate. I knew timing was critical. If I moved too early, I risked exposure and miscalculation. If I waited too long, Alex could entrench himself further, making recovery more difficult. It was a delicate balance, a chess game played with precision and foresight. During this time, I also began documenting my emotional journey. The betrayal had been personal, deeply so. I had helped Alex when he had nothing, and he had repaid that trust with professional opportunism. Writing down my feelings didn't weaken me. It clarified my motivations. I could see the pattern clearly now. Anger, yes, but also determination, strategy, and the desire to reclaim what was mine. Not for revenge alone, but for justice, integrity, and recognition. A turning point came when I scheduled a discreet lunch with Lena, my trusted ally in the office. Over sandwiches in a quiet cafe, we discussed the unfolding dynamics. She had observed staff reactions, internal whispers, and client feedback. Her insights were invaluable. "People are starting to notice inconsistencies in his decisions," she said. "They're quietly asking questions, wondering why certain projects aren't performing as expected. If we position this right, the narrative can shift back." Her words gave me renewed confidence. The subtle cracks in Alex's facade, combined with my meticulous documentation and growing network of allies, meant that the next phase of my plan could begin. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was orchestrating a controlled, strategic reclamation of influence. I also began reaching out to former mentors and industry contacts, framing conversations around my ongoing professional contributions rather than the betrayal itself. By highlighting my expertise, I reinforced my reputation in the industry, ensuring that even external observers recognized my value. Each conversation was another brick in the foundation of my comeback, each connection another layer of credibility that Alex could not easily undermine. One evening, as I reviewed the portfolio of evidence I had compiled, I realized how far I had come. The betrayal that had initially left me paralyzed with shock and anger had been transformed into meticulous, calculated preparation. The network of allies, the documentation, and the quiet reinforcement of my expertise all pointed to a single conclusion. I was no longer a victim. I was a strategist, fully aware of my value and the steps needed to reclaim it. The final piece of the puzzle was timing. I needed to wait for the moment when the evidence, the allies, and the subtle cracks in Alex's authority converged. It had to be executed with precision, professionalism, and undeniable clarity. There was no room for emotion-driven action or impulsive confrontation. Every step needed to be deliberate, every word measured. By the end of the week, I felt a sense of calm determination I hadn't experienced since the day I first discovered my replacement. The betrayal still stung, but it no longer held me hostage. I had transformed it into a strategic advantage, a focused drive to reclaim not just my position, but the truth of my contributions, my professional reputation, and the respect I had earned over years of dedication. Walking through the office on Friday evening, I noticed subtle shifts. Staff members who had been cautious were now more willing to engage in private conversations with me. Clients responded positively to my check-ins, often referencing past projects and expressing appreciation for my guidance. Even Alex, for all his confidence, began to encounter resistance, questions about decisions, subtle disagreements, and moments where his authority was challenged by those who knew the truth. I left the building that evening with a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead was clear. It required patience, precision, and strategic execution. The betrayal that had once felt like a devastating blow was now a catalyst for action, a proving ground for resilience and calculated intelligence. And in that realization, I felt a surge of quiet empowerment. Alex may have assumed he had won, but the groundwork I had laid, the alliances I had quietly nurtured, and the undeniable evidence of my contributions meant that the story was far from over. I was ready to move forward, one deliberate, controlled step at a time, reclaiming my narrative and proving that integrity, skill, and strategic patience could triumph even in the face of personal betrayal. The following Monday, I returned to the office with a quiet sense of purpose. The weekend had given me time to reflect, refine my plan, and review the evidence I had meticulously gathered. My portfolio was complete: emails, project documents, client correspondence, and detailed timelines of initiatives I had led. Every piece was a testament to my work, my diligence, and the loyalty I had earned from colleagues and clients alike. I started the day with a series of brief check-ins with team members. My approach was calm, professional, and strategic, focused not on emotion, but on demonstrating expertise and reinforcing the foundation I had built. Staff responded positively. The gratitude and trust one had earned over years of collaboration began to resurface in subtle ways. It was a delicate balance, asserting authority without appearing aggressive, reminding people of my contributions without sounding vengeful. By mid-morning, I scheduled a discreet meeting with Lena and Mark, the two colleagues who had become key allies in my quiet reclamation of influence. We gathered in a small conference room, away from prying eyes, and reviewed the compiled evidence. I laid out the documents, annotated with clear notes on dates, responsibilities, and instances where Alex had taken credit for work I had completed. "This isn't about personal vengeance," I emphasized, my voice measured but resolute. "It's about setting the record straight, ensuring that the truth of our contributions is recognized. Our approach needs to be strategic, professional, and undeniable. Both Lena and Mark nodded, understanding the subtle balance of patience and precision required. They had witnessed my dedication firsthand and knew the stakes were high. Together, we developed a phased approach. Continue reinforcing client trust, quietly gather additional internal observations, and wait for the precise moment to present the evidence to key stakeholders. Timing, I reminded myself, was everything. Over the next few days, I focused on client interactions. Calls, emails, and project updates became subtle reminders of my expertise and involvement. Clients responded with appreciation, often referencing my guidance and previous leadership on critical initiatives. These interactions were more than professional courtesy. They were building blocks for the eventual demonstration of my value and authority. Simultaneously, I observed the office dynamics with heightened awareness. Alex, despite his outward confidence, was showing signs of strain. Minor errors, inconsistent decisions, and subtle pushback from staff revealed that his authority was not as absolute as he projected. These small cracks were opportunities, proof that the facade of power could be challenged without confrontation through evidence, relationships, and strategic influence. One evening, as I reviewed my compiled evidence at home, I felt a surge of both anticipation and focus. My chestnut hair fell loosely over my shoulders, green eyes fixed on the glowing laptop screen, blue blouse slightly wrinkled from the day, navy jeans comfortable yet professional. I realized that the betrayal had catalyzed a transformation. I was no longer reactive, no longer consumed by hurt or anger. I was strategic, precise, and unyielding in pursuit of justice and truth. That night, I also reflected on the personal dimensions of the betrayal. Alex had been someone I had helped, someone I had nurtured when he had nothing. The depth of his opportunism was staggering, yet it served as a reminder. Kindness and trust do not always guarantee reciprocity. The challenge, I understood, was to act with intelligence and integrity, using evidence and strategy rather than emotion as my tools. By midweek, I began identifying additional allies within the company. Quiet conversations, casual check-ins, and careful observation revealed employees who were dissatisfied with Alex's approach or uncertain about his decisions. These individuals became potential advocates, people who, when approached tactfully, could help reinforce the narrative of my contributions and subtly challenge the inaccuracies propagated by Alex. I also reached out to external mentors and industry contacts, framing conversations around ongoing projects, strategic insights, and professional development. Each interaction subtly reinforced my reputation and credibility, ensuring that even outside observers were aware of my expertise, leadership, and value. Alex's new title and position did not erase the respect and recognition I had cultivated over years. This realization was both empowering and motivating. One afternoon, Lena approached me with an update. "Samantha, I've noticed a few key clients are asking questions about recent decisions. They seem to be seeking clarification and guidance, and I think your involvement could provide reassurance. It's an opportunity to subtly reinforce your expertise without creating conflict." I nodded, recognizing the potential. Timing and discretion were crucial. Each step had to be calculated, each action deliberate. The goal was not confrontation for its own sake, but the undeniable demonstration of value, competence, and truth. Later that evening, I reviewed the final draft of my portfolio. Every document, every annotation, every timeline was meticulously organized. It was a comprehensive record that spoke not only to my work, but also to the integrity and precision with which I approached professional challenges. I knew that when the moment came, the presentation would leave no room for doubt or dispute. As the week drew to a close, I began preparing for the final phase, engaging with key stakeholders and presenting the evidence in a controlled, professional manner. This required coordination, timing, and the careful management of both internal and external perceptions. I spent hours strategizing, rehearsing potential scenarios, and anticipating counterarguments. Despite the meticulous planning, there was still an undercurrent of personal emotion, a mix of lingering hurt, cautious anticipation, and a deep, simmering resolve. I reminded myself constantly that the focus was strategic clarity and professional integrity, not petty revenge. Yet the satisfaction of knowing that the truth would be revealed, that my contributions would be recognized, and that Alex's opportunism could be addressed, added a quiet intensity to my efforts. By Friday evening, I felt a sense of controlled anticipation. The evidence was complete, the allies were aligned, and the timing was near. I had transformed the raw pain of betrayal into meticulous preparation, strategic positioning, and reinforced credibility. Alex may have believed he had won, but he had underestimated not only my expertise and network, but also my capacity for patience, strategy, and unwavering focus. Walking through the office that evening, the dim glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across the floors, I felt a sense of calm empowerment. The journey was far from over, but the path was clear. I had converted personal betrayal into an opportunity to demonstrate resilience, intelligence, and strategic authority. As I left the building, I realized something fundamental. This was not just about reclaiming a position. It was about asserting truth, reinforcing integrity, and demonstrating that betrayal, no matter how personal or professional, could be met with intelligence, patience, and undeniable evidence. The story was moving toward its climax, and I was ready for it. I felt the quiet surge of confidence, the sense that the next moves I made would be decisive. The betrayal had hurt, yes, but it had also provided a roadmap, a strategic blueprint for reclaiming what was rightfully mine, proving my value, and demonstrating that integrity and skill could triumph over opportunism and betrayal. Monday morning arrived with a strange sense of tension and opportunity. I walked into the office, carrying my meticulously compiled portfolio, my chestnut hair neatly tied back, a crisp white blouse tucked into tailored black pants, and a calm determination in my step. Every detail was intentional, the appearance of composure, professionalism, and unwavering focus. This wasn't just about confronting Alex, it was about reclaiming authority, dignity, and the narrative of my own accomplishments. I headed to the conference room where a small group of key stakeholders, including board members and department heads, had agreed to meet with me. Lena and Mark sat discreetly near the back, offering quiet support. As I entered, I noticed Alex already seated, his confident posture barely masking a flicker of unease as he glanced at me. The subtle shift in his expression did not escape my notice. It was a small validation of the plan I had spent months crafting. I began by calmly outlining the projects and initiatives I had led over the past several years. Each piece of evidence was presented clearly: emails showing approvals, timelines demonstrating leadership, client feedback highlighting my role, and internal reports tracing the execution of critical initiatives. I spoke steadily, measured, and with precise authority, emphasizing facts over emotion. As I moved through the presentation, I observed reactions in the room. Board members leaned forward, absorbing the information. Department heads exchanged glances, some nodding quietly in recognition. Alex's facade of control was beginning to crumble subtly. He shifted in his seat, glanced down at notes, and avoided direct eye contact. The meticulous documentation left little room for rebuttal. Every claim he had made about these projects being his own now stood exposed against indisputable evidence of my leadership. Midway through, Lena discreetly handed me additional notes, examples of internal miscommunications orchestrated under Alex's leadership, as well as client confusion about recent decisions. Integrating these into my narrative reinforced a clear pattern. While Alex had taken credit, he had not delivered the same quality or consistency I had. The story was unfolding exactly as I had anticipated. "I want to be clear," I said, my tone firm but professional. "This presentation is not about personal vendetta. It's about accountability, clarity, and ensuring that credit is given where it is due. The projects and initiatives presented here reflect the work and leadership that I have consistently provided." There was a pause as the room absorbed the information. Board members exchanged whispers, reviewing the documents, nodding thoughtfully. Alex opened his mouth a few times to respond but paused, unsure how to counter the undeniable evidence. His confident veneer faltered, and I recognized the subtle realization that the game had shifted. By the end of the presentation, I had not only established the facts, but I had also demonstrated strategic clarity, professionalism, and leadership under pressure. The room was filled with a quiet acknowledgement of truth. Board members thanked me for the thoroughness of the documentation, and several colleagues quietly expressed their appreciation for bringing clarity to a situation that had caused confusion and tension. After the meeting, Lena and Mark caught up with me, their expressions reflecting relief and admiration. "You handled that perfectly," Lena whispered. "Calm, professional, undeniable. Alex didn't have a chance once you laid it out." Acclaim. Alex, meanwhile, was quietly reassigned to a different role within the company, one that did not involve oversight of the projects I had led. The transition was handled professionally, but the message was clear. Opportunism at the expense of integrity had limits, and the truth, when presented with evidence and precision, could not be ignored. In the weeks that followed, I reflected on the journey. The betrayal had been profound. A friend, someone I had nurtured and supported, had taken advantage of trust and opportunity. The emotional fallout had been intense. Shock, anger, sadness, and disbelief had colored the first days and weeks. But as the strategy unfolded, I realized that these emotions had been transformed into tools for empowerment. They sharpened my focus, clarified my priorities, and fueled my determination to act with intelligence rather than reaction. I also recognized that the experience had strengthened my resilience. I had navigated office politics, observed subtle dynamics, and strategically rebuilt relationships without sacrificing professionalism or composure. I had reinforced the importance of preparation, patience, and evidence-based advocacy. Most importantly, I had reclaimed my narrative and authority not through retaliation, but through deliberate, calculated action. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, reflecting on the journey, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. My chestnut hair caught the soft glow of the lamp. My green eyes reflected the calm determination that had carried me through the months of upheaval, and the portfolio lay neatly organized on the table, a symbol of both the betrayal I had endured and the empowerment I had achieved. I realized that the story of betrayal was not simply about loss. It was about growth, strategy, and the reclamation of integrity. Alex's opportunism had been a catalyst, forcing me to confront vulnerability, mistrust, and the fragility of human loyalty. But it had also revealed the enduring strength of preparation, strategic thinking, and professional competence. In the end, the lesson was clear. Betrayal, no matter how personal or professional, could be met with intelligence, patience, and unwavering commitment to truth. The emotional scars remained, but they were tempered by the knowledge that I had navigated the situation with precision, dignity, and effectiveness. I had transformed anger into strategy, hurt into clarity, and injustice into empowerment. Walking through the office one final time after the resolution, I felt a renewed sense of authority and calm. Colleagues greeted me with respect and genuine warmth. Clients continued to seek my guidance, and the truth of my contributions was no longer in question. The betrayal had been a formidable obstacle, but it had also been an opportunity, a proving ground for resilience, intelligence, and strategic empowerment. And as I stepped out into the evening light, I felt the weight of the past months lift slightly, replaced by quiet confidence. The friend I had once helped, the CEO who had betrayed trust, had been confronted not with vengeance, but with undeniable truth. The professional and personal balance had been restored, and I emerged stronger, wiser, and profoundly aware that integrity, preparation, and strategy could overcome even the most personal of betrayals. In that moment, I understood that this journey was about more than a position or a title. It was about reclaiming agency, asserting truth, and demonstrating that even in the face of betrayal, careful planning, resilience, and professionalism could triumph. The chapter of betrayal had closed, but the lessons, the empowerment, and the clarity of purpose would guide every step of my future.